of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, we're doing a study of the Canadian Transportation and Logistics Strategy. We are joined today by the Honourable Marc Garneau, our Minister of Transport. Thank you very much for coming today. Michael Keenan, the Deputy Minister, and Ms. Young, the Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to open it rapidly to you so that we can have you answer as many questions as possible this morning before we have to break. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And first of all, before I make a few remarks, let me thank the committee for the work that they have been doing on the Navigation Protection Act and the work that you've been doing, I know, on C-30. And I understand you'll be looking at drones fairly shortly. So thank you very much for the work that is being done by this committee. Merci aussi de m'avoir invité ici pour.
Thank you also for inviting me to speak to the vision of the government for Transportation 2030. I have a few remarks to make, and I'd be very pleased to answer your questions. Madam Chair, honourable members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to meet with the committee today. It is my great pleasure to provide you with an overview of Transportation 2030, my strategic plan for the future of transportation in Canada that I announced on November 3rd in Montreal at the Chamber of Commerce. With the significant body of work and inputs from Canadians in the report of the Canadian Transportation Act review as a starting point last April 27, I asked Canadians for their feedback on priorities and initiatives. Transport 2030 is a balanced reflection of and response to what we heard from Canadians. A key recommendation of the Canada Transportation Act review was to envision Canada's transportation system 20 to 30 years from now and invest today to build that future. Our vision for Canada's transportation system in 2030 is of an increasingly electrified system supporting alternative fuels like hydrogen, of course, and electricity, increasingly using rail and renewable fuels in more efficient planes like the C-Series.
The trade in 2030 will have shifted significantly to Asia and other developing regions. We must have access to gateways with advanced logistics and integrated infrastructure and be able to get Canadian products, services, and people to key markets safely and efficiently while protecting our environment. These changes are happening today, and if we're not ready, we're going to be left behind. Transportation 2030 is based on 5 themes that were validated by Canadians as being the right framework for directing immediate and future actions to encourage trade, boost economic opportunities, and support a growing middle class. The first of these 5 themes is the traveler. Under this theme, we will work to support greater choice, better service, lower costs, and new rights for travelers. Near-term actions to support this theme include pursuing legislation to provide greater transparency, clarity, and fairness for Canada's air traveler, including clear standards for treating and compensating passengers under specific circumstances. Pursuing legislation to change international ownership restrictions from 25% to 49% of voting interests for Canadian air carriers, and working with the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, CATSA, to ensure that travelers at Canadian airports go through security faster while maintaining the same high security standards. The second theme, safer transportation, focuses on building a safer, more secure transportation system that Canadians trust, including in the near term by, first of all, moving up our review of the Railway Safety Act from 2018 to 2017 in order to further improve railway safety. And 2, amending the Motor Vehicle Safety Act to allow us to compel vehicle manufacturers to recall defective and unsafe vehicles. Sous le thème de le transport écologique et
Under the theme of green and innovative transportation, we will look to reduce air pollution and embrace new technologies to improve Canadians' lives by working with provincial governments on a pan-Canadian framework that includes a national transportation strategy to reduce carbon pollution by 30% from 2005 levels by 2030, and supporting the development of a modern and agile regulatory framework for emerging technologies, including connected and automated vehicles and drones, unmanned air vehicles. The 4th theme, waterways, coasts, and the North, will build world-leading marine corridors that are competitive, safe, and environmentally sustainable, and enhance northern transportation infrastructure.
Protection Plan announced by the Prime Minister on November 7th, last week, in fact, in Vancouver, represents a significant concrete step forward under this theme. The plan will protect our coasts in a modern and advanced way through 4 main priority areas: creating a world-leading marine safety system that improves responsible shipping and protects Canada's waters. Secondly, restoring and protecting the marine ecosystems and habitats, including measures to address abandoned vessels. Strengthening partnerships and launching co-management practices with Indigenous communities, including building local emergency response capacity. And 4, investing in oil spill cleanup research and methods to ensure that decisions taken in emergencies are evidence-based. As the Prime Minister noted in his announcement of this initiative, these strong measures are urgently needed and long overdue. This represents the most significant investment ever made to protect our oceans and coastlines. And 5th, as a theme, trade corridors to global markets. Actions under this theme will improve the performance and reliability of our transportation system to get products to market to grow Canada's economy, including by, first of all, investing $10.1 billion for transportation infrastructure to help eliminate bottlenecks and building more reliable trade corridors. Secondly, establishing a new data regime to support sound investment decisions by government and make sure that data is available to all who operate, oversee, analyze, and use the transportation system. And thirdly, pursuing greater transparency and reliability for the rail transportation supply chain and supporting a more competitive and efficient rail sector that invests in much-needed capacity improvements. Je tiens à souligner que
I wish to emphasize that in the weeks and months ahead, I'll be outlining our major undertakings in greater detail so all Canadians are aware of the improvements we plan to make and the benefits they will bring. Madam Chair, the launch of this strategic plan is only the beginning of our work. We must now turn our efforts to implementing the initiatives we have announced and defining further actions to come in close collaboration with governments, industry, and Indigenous partners to benefit all Canadians. This concludes my opening remarks, and I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Our first questioner is Ms. Block for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here this morning, Minister Garneau. We really appreciate the opportunity to discuss with you the supplementary estimates B. And I also want to thank Mr. Keenan for being here as well. I note in the supplementary estimates that there was an amount scheduled for community participation in the amount of $1.6 million. And it would appear that in these supplementary estimates, you're asking for an additional $475,000. And I guess, I would make a couple of observations before I ask my question. Your department held what would appear to be a very quiet online consultation on the BC oil moratorium that ended at the end of September. I have submitted an ATIP for the results of this consultation and to date haven't received a response, which, as you can well imagine, is somewhat frustrating. And again, then in your remarks on Tuesday evening at the reception hosted by the Port of Prince Rupert and the Port of Vancouver, you didn't mention the BC North Coast tanker moratorium in a speech that was largely about BC marine issues. And I find that rather interesting as well, that didn't find its way into your remarks when you were talking about marine safety. As you are aware, I oppose this moratorium because it doesn't make any sense to single out a specific resource. We know that the Queen of the North sinking resulted in the largest oil spill in that area's history, but of course we aren't talking about banning ferry traffic as a result of that. I also believe that if a company can prove that they can operate safely in the northern BC environment, they should be able to do so. So I guess I have a couple of questions for you. Mainly, what is the additional $475,000 for in community participation, for consultations, for on an already $1.6 million budget? And what single incident can you point to that would justify the tanker moratorium?
Well, thank you for your question, and let me speak about the tanker moratorium because there's no secret here. I was given a very clear mandate, and it's public. Mm-hmm. The Prime Minister gave it to me over a year ago, and that was to formalize a moratorium on crude oil tanker traffic for the north coast of British Columbia. I've been to British Columbia 5 times in the past year. I have consulted with the shipping industry, with environmental NGOs, and a great deal with coastal First Nations. I think that those meetings have been well advertised. There's been a great deal of dialogue, and there's costs associated with organizing these meetings, of course, because there are a lot of people who have to come together for these meetings. As I say, I started this process last January, and I've also said publicly that we will be formalizing that moratorium before the end of this year. So there's been no secrecy with respect to the issue of the moratorium. And the reason that we have decided to formalize a moratorium is that we believe that the north coast of British Columbia, which includes the Great Bear Rainforest, is an extremely valuable ecological area of British Columbia. And that is the primary reason behind this.
Thank you very much. I then look forward to the results of the ATIP that I've put in, outlining exactly what you have here and seeing exactly who was consulted. I also note in the supplementary estimates that there is a request for 800.
Can I just mention, we will have the departmental officials here as far as the supplementary estimates for an additional half hour at least after the minister is gone.
Sure. Thank you. So I also note that in the supplementary estimates, and just on that, it's my understanding that the minister is here to speak to us on the supplementary estimates.
Well, he's here to speak to us as the minister. The departmental officials,
sure,
traditionally, as you know, speak to the estimates.
Well, okay, I'm going to ask more questions.
If I may say so, I'd be very, very happy to really answer questions on the Transportation 2030. I'm only here for an hour if you want to focus on that, but it's your choice.
Yeah, I recognize that, and so I'm focusing on the estimates. Thank you. I note that there's an additional amount for $842,582 for the Navigation Protection Act consultation. And as you know, and as you thanked us for all the work that we're doing on that, we've heard from many witnesses who have come before this committee that to this point they haven't been consulted. And so I'm wondering if you would be able to identify, what that funding is for, and is there an overlap with that funding on the Community Participation Fund that I've already identified in my questioning?
Well, thank you for your question again. And on the Navigation Protection Act, again, I would like to thank you. I asked the committee if they would add to the process of reviewing the Navigation Protection Act because we felt that it was important to do so. I've also said that other consultations are ongoing as well. As you know, probably recently, we also announced that Two Rivers had been put back on the schedule of the Navigation Protection Act, which is a clear indication that there is a consultation process that has been ongoing and will continue always to be ongoing. So, yes, the committee is looking at the Navigation Protection Act, and we very much are looking forward to your recommendations. And I won't go into the background as to why we asked for this. I think you're very familiar why we asked for it. We have a very important emphasis on making sure that the Navigation Protection Act is a balanced act that properly reflects the need to, yes, address issues of navigation on our waterways, and your input is very, very important. But we have also said very clearly, and I can pull it out of a letter that I sent to the chair, that we are also doing other consultations as well, and some of these involve us meeting with people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garneau. Mr. Secan.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. Once again, I know your time is valuable, so we appreciate for you your attendance. Now, I asked Mr. Emerson about foreign ownership, so I'm very happy that you made that announcement. But I'm kind of curious, the difference between 25 and 49%, when a single owner, a foreign owner, or a combination of, they're still capped at 25%. So what difference is there to allow the ownership to be 49%?
What we wanted to do was to recognize that there is the airline industry is a capital-intensive industry, and that in order for us to stimulate competition, it would be a good thing for us to allow a greater pool of potential investments, potential money sources to be available for companies in Canada that wanted to start an airline. A couple, of course, as you know, Interjet and Jetlines are examples. A little while back, there was a company called New Leaf, of course, that got into operation as well. So there is a desire for carriers to get into the business here in Canada. We think that that is a valuable thing. But they have all indicated that one of the challenges is accessing capital, and so some of that capital can come from foreign, from international sources as well. But we also felt that in making this change from 29 to 49%, that it was important to retain Canadian control. In fact, as we say, so that. Those are the primary considerations, making more capital available, but still keeping the companies under Canadian control.
Thank you. I did see it was 49%, and I was pleased about that as well. Keep it Canadian. Now, I'm probably on the record a couple of times asking about CATSA and service standards. I've compared Pearson to Heathrow, and I was actually surprised that there is no universal processing time or standard. So I'm curious to know whether CATSA will be would adhere to a service standard.
Thank you. And one of the elements that I've just outlined and that I outlined in my Transportation 2030 speech was the fact that Canadians have very clearly said to us that they would like waiting times to be reduced when they go to the airport. We have all had the experience of going to the airport, of seeing a very long line, and often wondering why not all of the stations were being manned for passing through security. There's no question at this point in time, in this year to date, 2016, and the first 10 months of this year, the statistics are that we have an 84% waiting time. That's to get to the beginning of the line within 15 minutes. Okay, so there are airports like Heathrow and Gatwick and others that have a target. There is no universal. It's chosen by individual airports, but there are other airports that have a higher target in the 90s and in a lower period of time in 10 minutes, which is a significant difference. So if one looks at how we perform versus the rest of, and by the way, Pearson is a very busy airport, over 40 million passengers last year. There are some airports that have quicker passing. The average is 84%. I think Pearson is at 81% at the moment, but there are we have 8 big airports, and some of them are in the low 90% in terms of performance. We monitor these things. I have said in the speech that we need to do better, and it's my intention to try to come forward at some point with measures that will, and some of them are technology. We have been evaluating a system called CATSA Plus, which is a line that instead of one person going after the other allows 4 people to arrive at the same time. And it allows the frequent passengers to get processed. They can jump the queue and go much more quickly. I've seen it myself at Montreal Airport. By the way, Calgary Airport, the international terminal now has 6 CATSA Plus lines. So we're looking at it, and it appears to be a more efficient way of doing it. That's part of it, but there are other things as well. And so it's my intention to try to find a way that we can do better, because it's, I would say, almost the primary irritant for air passengers, and we need to do better.
Thank you for that. That's great. 1 minute left. Our committee's entertaining traveling to the north, and I know you've mentioned earlier that the north is important to you, and I just wonder if you could speak to that, see if that's a worthwhile exercise for us, perhaps.
I think it's a very worthwhile exercise. I found my experience up in Iqaluit to be very valuable, and that was a roundtable as part of the theme, the coasts, our waterways, and the north. And when I say the north, we met at a roundtable with people from not only Nunavut in Iqaluit, but also from the Northwest Territories, from the Yukon, from northern Quebec, and from Labrador, so lots of northern communities. And there's no question that in terms of infrastructure, the north is in need of more infrastructure. There are 82 runways in the north, but only 11 of them are paved, and there is a lack of weather services for some of those places. There's a lack of lighting, proper lighting. Some of the runways are pretty thin in terms of their width, and so there is a need for infrastructure on that side. We were in Iqaluit, and in Iqaluit they do not yet have a deep water capability. So when a resupply ship comes in, they have to work with the tides, take the stuff off, put them on barges that come into the shore. So those are just 2 examples. If we go further than that, the North also wants to develop resources. And so the issue of resource development is a challenge up there because of the lack of roads for moving those resources if you've got a mining operation somewhere. So I think you'll find it very useful when you go up there, and I commend you for doing it. I think that we need to shed more light on the lack of infrastructure for the North, a place that is in transition because of environmental change and because of the fact that it has resources. And so I think it's a very timely thing that you do go there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alban.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here. 6 minutes between the 2 of us is not enough, so without much further ado, I will talk about Via Rail's frequent rail program. In November, you gave an interview to La Presse, and then 10 months later, you spoke to the Canadian Club, and later on, your parliamentary secretary said the study was still ongoing. So my question is, this project, increasing the frequency of passenger rail, you want to bring us into the 21st century with public transit or a transit system that would help bring down GHGs and to build this rail infrastructure during high-use corridors. What is the status of that, and when will the government commit to such a strategy? Thank you for your question. Yes, we are studying that issue. We invested $3.3 million in budget 2016 to review the plan that was proposed by Via Rail. If we go ahead, the federal government will be involved. Taxpayers' money will be involved, so we have to do our due diligence first. Via is proposing a high-frequency passenger rail service. You know the details of that. And when you look at the details of such a huge project, well, it's important for us to ensure that the projections were well done. Projections in terms of costs, in terms of the number of passengers, because we're assuming that people will choose not to drive, but to take the train, because the train will go faster. We're not talking about a high-speed train, but faster rail service and more frequent rail service as well. So we really have to do our homework before we commit to this project. And we hope the study will be finished in the first months of next year. Thank you. I also have a question on the SUP-Bs, because $860,000 additional dollars were given, but I'll ask this question to your officials later. The process is so slow, and will that lead to problems with regard to the REM project in Montreal? Are Via and the local train service going to share rails? Because your project, or this project, is so slow, could it imperil it? In my view, no. We're doing our homework with regard to the Via Rail project. And the Montreal REM project, the Metropolitan Transportation Project, they're going ahead on their side. I don't think there are any risks for the Via project. You say it's a slow process, but I don't necessarily agree with that characterization. We're going as fast as we can, but sometimes it just takes time because you want to do your due diligence before you make a decision. Well, I think we should agree to disagree on that, but I have a question on another issue, airports, which of course is part of your mandate. In your view, is it appropriate to order a study by a company, Credit Suisse, in fact, on the potential of privatizing our airports, when in fact Credit Suisse itself is a company which has shares in private airports? In your view, is this inappropriate, or does it demonstrate a lack of ethics? The contract was awarded by the Department of Finance, and I'm sure that they did their due diligence before deciding to award the contract to Credit Suisse. We're a new government. We are examining all kinds of possibilities, all kinds of opportunities to grow our economy. What's important for us is that if we do make a decision with regard to airports or ports or any other federal infrastructures, we will do so in the interest of Canadians. But I think it is incumbent on us to look at all opportunities, and the Emerson report, which was done under the previous government, to look at all opportunities. We haven't taken any decisions yet. That's not a priority at this point, but we are just looking at all options. Thank you very much. I hope that you will have a great power of influence at Cabinet over your finance colleague, because There's something here I don't quite understand. Last week or the week before, Michael Sabia, who's very well known, he said that should there ever be an infrastructure bank where pension funds or huge companies could take part in funding our infrastructure, that these companies would demand a return of between 7 and 9%. But in your election campaign, and your government has kept on repeating that we should invest when interest rates are low. So what should Canadians think when they see their government borrow at 1.3 or 1.5%, when their government might be thinking of privatizing public infrastructure, which will end up costing the taxpayer 5 times more? Well, I can't speak for Mr. Sabia. He has a mandate from the Caisse de dépôt, which is to make money, clearly. But I can assure you that the reason why created this concept of an infrastructure bank is to attract more money to improve our infrastructure. As I said yesterday, if you look at studies conducted by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, well, they've said that there is a lack of infrastructure. There's an infrastructure deficit which could reach $100 billion. So there is a need for us to improve our infrastructure. And even if the government makes unprecedented investment, billions and billions of dollars over 5 years, this still would not cover all of our infrastructure needs. So we believe it is a good thing to create a type of infrastructure bank in order to attract private sector investment. However, let me assure you, before we go ahead with that, we will impose conditions which are acceptable to both parties. So that's how it would work. We are very respectful of taxpayers' money, and personally, I believe that Canadian taxpayers and Canadian citizens want modern infrastructure in this country. And I think Canadians are on board with this initiative.
Mr. Akinol.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for being with us this morning. I have a small question. We know that the vision underlying Transportation 2030 is to have an efficient transportation system, but also to have a green, innovative, and safe system here in Canada. What role do waterways play in this strategy?
En fait, dans ma lettre de mandat,
In my mandate letter, which I received a year ago, the Prime Minister told me that one of the things I had to do was to improve marine safety. And this was an admission 1 year ago that the status quo was unacceptable, that we had to do more to make marine safety better. We are a trading nation, as you know, and a great deal of our trade, perhaps people don't know it, especially people living within the country, but a great deal of our trade goes through our ports, and many of our goods and resources travel the oceans, and I include in this the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Seaway. So in coming years, we certainly hope that Canada will engage in even greater trade volumes. So it's all the more important for us to ensure that we have a degree of marine safety, whether it comes to detecting a problem, and we hope it doesn't happen, a spill, for instance, we hope that doesn't happen, or a distressed ship. We need to know that we can respond quickly, or rather first realize quickly there's a problem and react as quickly as possible. This is essential. We have to make those upgrades. In order to make those upgrades, we need to involve coastal communities, including First Nations, who in fact want to be part of this initiative. And they are basically on the ground and often the first ones to respond. Recently, there was the incident at Bella Bella, and of course First Nations were directly affected, and they have a lot of expertise. Abandoned vessels or shipwrecks, they don't only represent a navigational obstacle, but they can also represent an environmental problem if there's still fuel in any sunken ship. So there are many aspects. And we also have marine species, we have marine animals, which live off our coasts, and these populations are important. There's the fishery as well. Many people earn their livelihood fishing. So this is also why we want to have a plan to protect our oceans. So as traffic increases, we want to make sure all the more that it is safe. Thank you. In your Transportation 2030 strategy, you also spoke about trade corridors. Can you tell us a little more about what these trade corridors are, what role they can play for communities and regions and for our economy? We trade in the order of just over $2 billion a day with the United States, and there are 23 rail crossings over the border. We also have roads that cross the border. Biggest border crossing, of course, is the Detroit-Windsor crossing. So these are transportation or trade corridors. If a train or truck leaves Montreal for Chicago to the U.S. Midwest, the question is, how can we make that transportation as efficient as possible, be it by rail or by truck or by ship along the St. Lawrence Seaway through the Great Lakes. That's just one example. Sometimes there are bottlenecks in these corridors, and it is in our interest to get rid of these bottlenecks, because if our transportation system is not reliable or efficient, the people we deal with, our trade partners, will turn to other partners. It's a very competitive business, the delivery of goods. So it's particularly important that Canada have efficient corridors. Another important corridor is our Western Railway hub, potash, grain, lumber, container traffic heading to Prince Rupert towards the Asia-Pacific Gateway. In that area in Western Canada, it's extremely important that the transportation corridor be as efficient as possible. There can't be any slowdowns in the transportation of these goods. And even when they reach port, before the goods are loaded onto container ships, that whole process has to be as efficient as possible. Thank you. Do we have any time left, Madam Chair? Very brief question. We've already invested $62 million in electric vehicles. I know it's a bit early, perhaps, to answer this question, but have there already been benefits to this investment? Well, that was the first step. This process will take time, but clearly people want to know that there are electric charging stations across the country. This would reduce their anxiety if they did decide to buy an electric vehicle. We have to do more, and it's going to take time. So we'll see what the results are as more and more people buy electric vehicles.
Mr. Badaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Minister Garneau. It's great to have you again this morning. A couple questions, and I first have to preface my comments by saying how happy I am and actually excited of your announcement on November 3rd in Montreal. It's been something that this whole horseshoe has been very much interested in. I know Member Berthold was always interested in trying to establish this strategy that you spoke about, in particular the 5 pillars that you announced. So it's great news for the future of Canada's transportation and economic future. With that being said, Minister Garneau, moving forward, and this is something that we're really very much interested in now that you've made that announcement, is moving forward. It was mentioned earlier that we've set regions that we want to visit, the first being the north, and for the very reasons you outlined. The second is Western Canada, then followed by the prairies, and Eastern Canada and Central Canada. Moving forward, where do you see this committee actually helping you bring forward this vision 2030 to the forefront with our travel, with our efforts, bringing in witnesses, bringing in the partners to really have it an all-inclusive process to, in fact, ensure that this strategy is not only relevant to transportation and logistics, but also ultimately an economic strategy for the country.
And I agree with you. It's ultimately an economic strategy. And I welcome everything that the committee chooses to look at. This is, although I made an announcement or a speech on the 3rd of November about Transportation 2030, it doesn't mean that, okay, the work's done, we've decided what we're going to do, and now we don't need to do any more work, other than legislating, of course, to put this into action or writing new regulations, those kinds of things. It's a continuously evolving subject area. It's a complex one. There are a host of areas where this committee can be of very significant use. I've asked, by the way, the Senate Transport Committee, I asked them many months ago to look at automated and connected vehicles. I felt that that was something that the Senate could provide very valuable advice on. But there are a host of areas related to transportation because it's changing at a very rapid pace. This is not the 19th century where things moved, very, very slowly in terms of the evolution of transportation. This is a period of time where we are changing transportation in terms of the technologies that are involved, in terms of taking into account our environmental concerns, in terms of being much more careful about safety because people are aware of safety as they previously were not, but have now said this is particularly important. So there are a host of areas where you, as a committee, can be useful. I understand that you may be looking at UAVs. I think there's an embarrassment of riches in terms of potential areas where you can look at it, and whatever you choose to do, I think I'm sure will be very useful.
And from the economic side, do you find it prudent as well that we actually include a binational forum? That we do, in fact, talk to our neighbors, especially to the south and in the States. I know, for example, they're moving forward with the Continental One. It's a highway that's coming out of Miami down through the eastern seaboard and into western New York and then, of course, into Ontario. Rail, as you mentioned earlier, is also another area of which we see binational trade happening on a daily basis, and, of course, shipping. There are some challenges with respect to some of the regulations that we're noticing on the water, on the rail, interswitching, and the list goes on. So all the more reason, as we're moving forward with the strategy, be it transportation and therefore attaching itself to the economy, would it be, in your opinion, prudent that we do it in a binational forum?
I think you raise a very good point, and because of the sheer amount of trade that we do with the United States, we are linked through an umbilical with the United States as no other two countries are in the world. They are our primary trading partner, and it is in our interest to harmonize as much as possible on regulations. Of course, there's the Regulatory Cooperation Council that exists between the two countries. I'm glad to say that in the area of transportation, we are very close in terms of being on the same wavelength because we realize that our trains cross each other's boundaries. We realize that our cars, our trains, our trucks, our ships work in each other's, through the Great Lakes, for example, in each other's backyard, and that it is in our interest when it comes to safety regulations, when it comes to anything that could potentially cause a problem when you arrive at the border. Sorry, you can't cross because you don't conform to some of our requirements. It can be some very esoteric things, but it's in our interest to harmonize as much as possible. I can say that I had a very good relationship with Secretary Anthony Fox, the Secretary of Transport. Of course, there will be a new administration, and one of my first acts, when the new administration is put in after January 20th, is to seek a meeting with the Transportation Secretary to continue the work of harmonizing as much as possible. We vitally need to be working together, and it applies to other things as well. I mean, our airplanes cross each other's borders. UAVs are being developed, and it's in our interests with the FAA that we have the same standards with respect to safety wherever possible. It doesn't mean we're always going to do exactly the same thing. Anything you can do to advance that would be very valuable, yes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Block.
Very much, Madam Chair, and I hope to share my time with my colleague, Mr. Berthold. Right off the top, I just want to say how troubling I find it that both the members on the opposite side of this table and you yourself, Minister, continue to purport the whole idea that this committee is here to serve your purposes as the minister, when in fact committees are the masters of their own destiny. And it is up to the committee members to decide what should be on their agenda. And I find it interesting that you would even suggest that the Senate committee is there to serve your purposes as well. But I want to get on to
May I say,
something.
because
No.
I'm not going to let you get away with this.
No,
that is
I'm-
a gross distortion of anything that
wasn't
I
a
have ever
question,
said
Madam
here.
Chair.
I welcome.
That wasn't.
Minister Garneau, take the opportunity to respond, but please make it short.
Well.
So that Ms. Block can get on to her questions.
Well, I reject the premise. I reject it violently. I have not ever suggested that this committee or the Senate committee should be doing anything that I propose. I have been asked about what possibly the committee can look into it, but yes, indeed, you are masters of your own destiny, as is the Senate committee.
Thank you very much. In your speech in Montreal, you were long on acknowledging the issues that are universally recognized but short on solutions or commitments to act expeditiously. For example, on airport security, you said that you will look to set internationally competitive targets, but gave no timeline or commitment to the resources to get there. You also said that you will look at innovations, but didn't identify which ones or by when. You said you would look at CATSA governance, but once again failed to state what the issues were and by when you would look at them. On the Passenger Bill of Rights, there were no specifics. For example, the size of the financial penalties, the process by which they will be allocated, or who will determine what is caused by weather and what is the carrier's fault. But more importantly, Canada is the 5th most expensive country in the world for airline cost competitiveness, and your speech ignored this. One other area that I was very interested in and noted the absence of was that you had instructed the banks to study selling off Canada's airports and ports. I'm wondering if you could speak to the selling off of Canada's airports and ports and why you would have instructed that study to take place.
With all due respect, I think you must have read a different text from the text that I gave. I would encourage you to go back and look at the speech that I made. With respect to CATSA, with respect to a regime of rights for air travelers, with respect to making airline travel more competitive, I outlined the goals of this government. As you know, you're an experienced parliamentarian. The first thing that you do is indicate in your intentions what you are going to do. You then need to go through the process of eventually legislating or changing regulations or deciding how best to do it. And that is exactly what we are going to be doing now. We've only been in government for 1 year. Without patting ourselves on the back, I think we've done a remarkable amount of work in that first year in outlining the direction that we will be taking, and that was the purpose of that speech. The details will come in terms of improving screening time, in terms of the regime of rights, because we will look at what happens in other countries. And I've answered all these questions many times to the media. There's nothing mysterious about it. We did take one initiative very quickly, and that was to provide an exemption to 2 airlines to begin to continue their task of trying to create low-cost airlines with the 49% provision. So we did a remarkable amount within the first year, but you know that it then takes time to implement that, and that is something that is going to happen in the course of time.
So my question was about your direction to study the selling of Canada's airports and ports, but I'm going to
didn't
now
give that direction.
turn the rest of my time to Mr. Berthold.
In your time.
I would like you to tell me where I gave direction to sell our ports and airports. I would like you to tell me where I did that.
I've turned my time over to Mr. Berthold.
Merci. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Garneau.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Garneau. I also have many questions on the 2030 plan. What I'm concerned about is your agenda. I would have liked to have had more details on your agenda and your timelines, because this government has made many long-term commitments, but in your current mandate, what are your objectives? I would like to know what your results are in this mandate, because there's no short-term strategy, it seems. You also talked about moving up the review of the Rail Transportation Safety Act. In the House, I asked about the Lac Mégantic Ring Railroad, and you said that you wanted to shorten delays if possible. I spoke with the mayor of Lac Mégantic and other stakeholders. It seems that there are means at your disposal, but unfortunately, the Transport Canada representative on the committee is not working very hard to speed up the process to bring about this ring railroad around Lac Mégantic. Is there anything you can do? And has the city made any suggestions to you? Our position has not changed. We have clearly stated that the town is leading that study. If they can speed up the process, that's fine. They're the ones who are controlling it, and that will provide us with an earlier result. We are not the ones driving that committee. The town of Lac Mégantic is working with the company, and if they finish their work earlier, so much the better, and we will obtain the results, and then we'll be able to use them to decide how to move forward.
Mr. Fraser.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre, pour être là avec nous.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being with us here this morning.
From Nova Scotia, I watched with great interest when the coastal strategy was announced. In particular, you've mentioned at least twice this morning the role of abandoned vessels, but I was hoping you could perhaps share some details on how the investment in the Oceans Protection Plan will allow you to better identify owners and, more importantly, help the abandoned vessels that are currently dotting the coast of our nation to be removed.
Well, thank you for the question, and in fact, it is one of our colleagues that came forward with a motion on this, as well as there was one on the NDP side as well. So people are concerned about abandoned vessels. There's no question about it. From the transportation point of view, they sometimes can represent a hazard to navigation, so directly involve us. But my colleague, Minister LeBlanc, is also concerned about, and this is in his bailiwick, if some of these ships that have sunk represent an environmental concern. So essentially, the primary tool that we will be going after is to make sure that those who are owners of ships realize that they are responsible for the disposal of their ships. We'll look at measures to ensure that they are going to take the necessary measures in terms of their ownership, we'll look at the issue of insurance. We are going to make it very, very clear that if you own a vessel, you are responsible for it right up until its disposal. So that is the primary approach that we're taking. We're also going to accede to the Nairobi Convention, which deals with the responsibilities of ship owners with respect to disposing them at the end of their life. We're also going to work with the provinces, because this is obviously some of the provinces have ships and derelict vessels, to work with them in terms of trying to find the best way to ensure that the whole process of ownership and registration takes into account this requirement to dispose of. In terms of the funding for the hundreds of wrecks that exist, this is something that we'll probably approach on a gradual basis, because there's a large number, and we can't do them all at once. It's a little bit like contaminated sites. There are thousands of contaminated sites in this country. We cannot address all of those contaminated sites in one shot, so we do some of them year by year. So it's going to take a while.
Thank you very much. I find, for whatever reason, in the last number of years, not just in Canada but across the world, governments have not been particularly good at communicating the benefits of grand-scale economic strategies, whether they're trade-based or transportation-based or otherwise, to citizens. I know that there's going to be significant investments made in transportation corridors and transportation infrastructure. I'm wondering if you could perhaps give us some insight on how those investments that we're making, or that we will be making, will make a difference in the lives of Canadians and benefit people not just in global financial centres, but living in communities all across Canada.
Well, you're very right about the fact that we're probably not very good at communicating it. And I would dare say that most Canadians don't think on a daily basis about trade corridors. But let me give you a simple example, one that's often given. In some cases where trains are carrying merchandise, those trains are long trains. They've become increasingly longer. Sometimes they're over 2 miles long. And sometimes they will go through communities and where there are railway crossings. And when you're sitting at that railway crossing, because you've got to let the train go by, and a long time is going by, you're thinking about the fact that this is having an effect on your day, because this train seems interminable. So there is an example of the sort of the fluidity of transport being affected. And those trains, of course, have to go slower as they go by these crossings, so that affects them as well. So in some cases, the previous government, and I commend them for it, were involved with the Transportation Corridors Initiative, which was originally initiated back in 2005 by Jean Lapierre. They put in place some very good measures, and some of those involve vertical separation at grade crossings. That allows the trains to go by more quickly, and it makes car passengers much better humored. And so that's an example of where trade corridors make a difference. But there are many others that I could tell you. We have a long list of areas where we can improve those trade corridors for the benefit of our economy.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Mr. Fraser, we're running out of time. Minister Garneau, thank you very much for coming and for giving us a lot of very insightful information that will help us as we move forward on the committee. So thank you very much. I would now ask for the officials any other officials to please come to the table so that we can attempt to get some work done on the supplementary estimates prior to the vote being called. Thank you very much again. we'll suspend for a very short break while we get everybody lined up. Supplementary Estimates B, 2016-17, votes 1B, 5B, 15B, and 20B under Department of Transport, votes 5B and 10B under the Office of Infrastructure of Canada, vote 1B under the Federal Bridge Corporation Limited, vote 1B under the Jacques Cartier and Champlain Bridges, Inc., vote 1B under Via Rail Canada, Inc., and vote 1B under Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority, referred to the committee on Thursday, November the 3rd, 2016. And so I would open it up under votes 1B. If the officials would like to make brief remarks, we would appreciate it, but we'd like you to be available for questions as much as we can get in prior to a vote being called.
Merci. Bonjour. Je suis Michael Keenan.
Thank you very much. My name is Michael Keenan. Madam Chair, I'm very pleased to be here for the first time since having been appointed Deputy Minister at Transport Canada a couple of months ago. The priority of Transport Canada is to improve the safety and security of Canada's transportation network. In fact, the biggest item in the supplementary estimates B is for rail safety activities as laid out in the 2016 budget.
Canada is seeking support to continue enhancing rail safety by strengthening oversight of the rail and transportation of dangerous goods, improving rail safety awareness, and further supporting first responders' response to incidents. There's a series of other requests related to the Federal Bridge Corporation, Via Rail, and a number of, I would say, administrative transfers in supplementary estimates B. And all of these resources will help to ensure that our transportation system is safe and secure, and reliably and efficiently moves goods and people across the country in an environmentally sustainable manner. In the interest of time, I think I'll limit my introductory comments to that, other than to say un grand remercier et de me faire un plaisir à répondre.
So thank you very much, and I would be very pleased to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for finding time to be here with us today, and we will try to get through as quickly as possible something as important as our supplementary estimates. I'm going to open up the floor with Mr. Berthold.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Tout d'abord, Monsieur Keenan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Keenan, congratulations for your appointment. It will be a pleasure for us to work with you, I hope, over the coming months. And to have you answer the questions of the committee. If I may, I will come back to something the minister said, which actually struck me. The minister challenged my colleague to find anything he had ever said regarding the privatization of our ports and airports. Well, in October, the Globe and Mail clearly said that the Liberal government had asked for Crédit Suisse to conduct a study on the benefits of privatization of airports. If the Minister of Transport was not aware that his government had asked for this study or analysis, I believe we have reason to be concerned with the way this process was started by the Liberal government. Mr. Keenan, I would like to take advantage of your presence here to ask a couple of questions. First, I was very surprised in the study of the Navigation Protection Act that you had asked people to testify before the committee. including First Nations communities. You sent them letters asking them to testify before the committee. This confirms what the opposition has been saying, is that the conclusions of the study are foregone, and that this is included in the minister's mandate letter. Can you explain to us why you sent out those letters inviting those witnesses to testify here, even though the committee is supposed to be independent? And second, can you send us a copy of all of the consultations, the letter, the correspondence sent out to people with regard to the study on the Navigation Protection Act? Thank you, Madam Chair. I cannot say more than what the minister said about airports and ports. I believe he answered the question. I have nothing to add to what he said. With regard to the review of the Navigation Protection Act,
in that matter, that the minister and the department are very much looking forward to the results of the work of this committee on that, and as the minister, I think, indicated, I think looking for that to be very helpful in guiding our further work on that. There is, I can underline that there is no intention in any sort of correspondence, there is no intention on the part of the minister or the department to direct the work of the committee. When we have had some correspondence with Aboriginal groups who have come to us seeking our permission or approval to testify at the committee, and we have simply redirected them to the clerk because it's up to, in our view, we have no role in determining who testifies at the committee. We have in the supplementary estimates, the funds that you see in terms of reviewing the Navigable Waters Protection Act. Some of those funds are to simply maintain an avenue of dialogue and consultation with Canadians on that. A significant portion of them are to provide participant funding to Indigenous groups. And,
Monsieur Keenan,
Mr. Berthold, I didn't want to interrupt either, but if you are quoting the minister from a document, would you please supply the document to the clerk?
Yeah, I will. J'ai ici une copie d'une lettre que vous avez envoyée.
I have a copy of a letter here which Mr. Keenan sent. I will give this to the committee. Jess Osti, Lisa Fung, Marilyn Slett, in which you say, that said, we will communicate with the committee to encourage it to hear what these Indigenous communities have to say. That's a lot more than simply forwarding a letter to someone. You said in the letter that you would call upon the committee to hear these groups, and I would like to know why you sent such a request, and whether you did indeed make that send that. Yes, I remember now writing that email. I'm sorry, but it was not my intention to give the impression that I was directing the work of the committee. My concern was that Chief Slett, the chief of the Dehelsik First Nation in Bella Bella, did not understand quite the role of the department versus the role of the committee. I was trying to respond. I was trying to say that it was not the department's responsibility to choose the witnesses for the committee.
Created a sense of I was trying to direct the committee. My attempt was to correct and clarify for Chief Slett that it is not the authority of the Department of Transport to determine who the committee hears as witnesses, and was trying to redirect the chief to the clerk I think I did say incite or I think encourage. It was meant to affirm the idea that they would be, in our view, a good witness, but I did not there was no attempt to direct the work of the committee. I should add, if I could, Madam Chair, that the other matter that was raised is that the chief was very stressed. There's been a very bad accident in her community. There's been a terrible impact on her community. We were trying to reassure the chief as much as possible as she navigates a very difficult situation. And we clarified that the support for participant funding that they had made to the department was still under review. Our belief is that the participant funding that we are reviewing and granting to Indigenous groups will help them provide their perspective on this matter of the review of the law, to the benefit of perhaps their submissions to the committee or to the benefit of their submissions to the Government of Canada, and we're leaving them open to choose how they use that participant funding.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keenan. We have several, just because of our shortness of time, you have speaking notes from several of our folks at the table. If you can please reference them after the meeting or through the meeting as time prevails. Mr. Aubin.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci d'être.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. My first question is for the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister. Earlier, we were speaking with the Minister about airports and rail transportation, but I did not have enough time to talk about ports. And in this wave towards privatization, I also read in the Globe and Mail that the Liberal government had hired Morgan Stanley to study the privatization of 18 ports. So, two things. One, do we have the list of those 18 ports? Has it been made public? And second, can you give us an example of the type of port being potentially considered for consideration and the type of port which is not? In your examples, one for each case, tell us whether the port of Trois-Rivières is in either of these categories.
Minister said is that privatizing airports or ports is not something that has been discussed, and certainly it's something that we are, of course, it's obviously a big topic, but it's not something that I have privy to any information on.
Madam Chair, I might add to that the 18 ports that are referred to, I believe, would represent the 18 ports that are constituted as port authorities with letters patent signed by the Minister of Transport, and Trois-Rivières would be one of those 18.
Je reviens au transport.
I'll come back to rail transport. The minister said earlier that $3.3 million over 3 years would be spent to evaluate the possibility of a high-frequency via rail passenger trail. And item B would ask for $866,000 additional dollars. Can you tell us exactly what that money will be spent on in terms of evaluating that project? What's new in the project that would require this additional money? Madam Chair, as the minister said, the Government of Canada, the Department of Transportation has to do its own due diligence with regard to investment in this project.
$1,000 that is in the supplementary estimates B is the first year is one of 3 years of funding that was allocated in budget 2016, and we are using that for essentially due diligence, working towards investment grade analysis of the cost projections, investment grade analysis of the projections of passengers, to have a solid financial analysis to as quickly as possible to support the government's final decision of whether or not to invest in the high-frequency rail proposal of Via Rail.
Merci.
Thank you. I have another question for the Parliamentary Secretary. In the spirit of transparency,
Je voulais savoir si
I would like to know whether the partners with whom the Ministers of Finance and Transport talked about regarding an infrastructure bank, including BlackRock, can that list be made public?
The partenaire, si j'ai bien compris, le partenaire de
We haven't defined partners or an infrastructure bank yet. We're still working on the details with regard to the implementation of the bank.
Announced at the bank in the fall update. The government of Canada is working as part of the its broad strategy to renew Canada's infrastructure in developing the plans for exactly how the bank would operate, and those will be forthcoming.
Mr. Keenan. Mr. Reyes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses who came here this morning to answer our questions. My questions are for Ms. Boileau, Assistant Deputy Minister, Finance, Infrastructure. In the note you sent us on the third page, you say that the funds we're asking for come from the Municipal Infrastructure Fund and rural municipalities. Has this money not been spent by municipalities? Are you recouping that money and directing it elsewhere? What you are referring to is referred to Subspeed 10B. The amount of money for contributions will be adjusted, and that money will be taken from the AMBRIF, so the municipalities fund, and the customs, the border fund. These funds have sunsetted. They expired in 2014 and are now available for transfer. So this money had been accessible to the municipalities. We know their needs are great, but that money is going to be used to meet other needs, or is that money going to spend on municipalities? The money will go back to the municipalities. It'll be put into the gas tax fund, and it'll be distributed to municipalities who have not yet had access to the fund. The program started in 2004, ended in 2014. The money was sent back or had not been completely spent since some projects came in under budget. Thank you. There's a lot of talk of this new infrastructure bank by the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Infrastructure. The two ministers speak highly of this new infrastructure bank. If you read between the lines, and based on the information we've received, the $15 billion, which would 15 billion of the 35 billion for the bank, would come from money that originally had been slated for municipalities in the budget. Is that the case? The $15 billion referred to is part of the government's infrastructure investment platform. It's new money, which was announced in the 2016 budget. As the Deputy Minister for Transport Canada said, this work is in progress and is ongoing. I understand that what was announced in the budget, am I to understand that 15 billion is going into the infrastructure bank from the community bank? But this is money which existed already. It's not new money. It comes from the infrastructure item under the budget. It was part of the budget 2016 platform. That money will go towards those investments. Thank you. My next question is for the Parliamentary Secretary. We've heard so many figures and numbers during QP. We heard that 900 infrastructure projects had been authorized, But when you look at the numbers, it looks like only 8 of those projects have been authorized, which are underway. And this was about 3 weeks ago. Is that the right number or the wrong number? Or are we to believe that only 10 of those projects are actually underway, the ones who have been approved from the start of the year? My questions are only for you. These 700 projects you referred to are part of phase 1 in the infrastructure. You said 700 now. Originally it was 900. It's 700 given projects that were started last fall. So there were 900 projects. Of those, 700s are part of phase 1, which was announced in April. About 70% of projects which have been started. When we talk about a project or potential investment by the federal government, this also includes money for the design and the scoping and the development and studies. My question is, how many sites are actually under construction right now? You said that 70% of those 900 projects, 70% of the 900 projects have received funding. Not only for construction sites, but for studies as well. My question is, of the 900 projects, how many of those projects are active? How many of them involve workers on the ground? Well, the number, a number was given a few weeks ago. I don't know if that has changed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have actually questions focusing on 2 specific projects, Ms. Hurdle and Mr. Cantillo. With respect to the Windsor-Detroit Bridge, has there been an update to the business plan for this bridge?
Yes, we obviously on a regular basis look at the business plan and provide updates as the project moves along. There are a number of activities currently ongoing on the project right now with respect to U.S. property acquisition, site preparation on the Canadian side, utility relocation. So on a regular basis, we look and refresh the plan based on as the activities progress.
And what does the rather substantial lift in the budget represent?
So the...
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I know how much work must go into preparing to come before committee on supplementary estimates, and a vote has been called, and we have some distance to get to the House for that. So I'm going to ask the committee if it's their desire now that I call out the votes for the various departments that are before us today.
Yep, so moved.
All right. So I call vote 1B under Department of Transport. Shall vote 1B under Department of Transport carry? On division. On division. Please raise your hands when I ask those questions. On division. I call votes 5B, 15B, and 20B under Department of Transport. Shall votes 5B, 15B, and 20B under Department of Transport carry? On division. I call vote 5B under Office of Infrastructure. Shall vote 5B under the Office of Infrastructure carry? On division. I call vote 10B under Office of Infrastructure. Shall vote 10B under Office of Infrastructure carry? On division. I call vote 1B under the Federal Bridge Corporation Limited. Shall vote 1B under the Federal Bridge Corporation Limited carry? On division. I call vote 1B under the Jacques Cartier and Champlain Bridges, Inc. Shall vote 1B under the Jacques Cartier and Champlain Bridges, Inc. carry? On division. I call vote 1B under Via Rail Canada, Inc. Shall vote 1B under Via Rail Canada, Inc. carry? Carries. On division. I call vote 1B under Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. Shall vote 1B under Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority carry? Carried. On division. Shall I report votes 1B, 5B, 15B, and 20B under Department of Transport? Votes 5B and 10B under Office of Infrastructure of Canada. Vote 1B under the Federal Bridge Corporation Limited. Vote 1B under the Jacques Cartier and Champlain Bridges, Inc. Vote 1B under Via Rail Canada, Inc., and Vote 1B under the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority to the House. All those in favor on division. Thank you very much. My apologies to all of you the officials that have come out to this meeting. I thank you for supplying us with the information that you did. And that's it. Move adjournment.